Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, as promised, we are going to kick off the latest of my mini Japan mini-series that we do. So for this review, we are going to kick off with a Japanese beer, and this is a brewery that is featured on the channel twice before, if memory serves me correctly. These guys only featured for the first time on the channel back in December of 2022, which was my last trip over here. They're a brewery who are a relatively new addition to the Japanese beer scene, but they've built a very good reputation for themselves in that short lifespan. And I have to say, based on the beers that I had from them before, that reputation was very, very well deserved. But the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I have tried from them before. It's a style that I know these guys can do very well, and a style that I enjoy generally speaking. So needless to say, I'm very, very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Shizuoka Prefecture, right next to Mount Fuji, to a little bit to the south of Tokyo. We are going to go to Mochimune City, and that means that we're going to have a look at yet another beer from the wonderful West Coast Brewing. So this particular beer is called Freestyle Sandbox. So this is volume number 3. I should point that out because they release this beer every so often with a slightly different recipe. But this one comes in at 8.5% ABV. It's another New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. And yeah, I believe this beer was released in March of 2022. But this was one of a few beers that I saw at liquor shop Asahiya here in Osaka from West Coast Brewing, and this one caught my eye because of the hop bill. This is loaded with New Zealand hops, and as many of you who've watched the channel for any length of time will know, I love the Kiwi hops. So yeah, this one just seemed like an ideal fit for me. But as always, a big shout out to the guys at Liquor Shop Asahiya in Taishibashi Maichi in Osaka. Koji and his daughter Rika, lovely people, and they've got a great selection of beers there, including many from Japan and many from, you know, they had a lot of Australian and Canadian stuff this time, and quite a few European things too from what I saw. So yeah, always a good place to go. I always enjoy my visits there. I'll put the link to their Facebook page in the video description below. But they're pretty much my main supplier of Japanese beer, I have to say. So yeah, let's crack on with this one and see what it has in store for us. As always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, however, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from West Coast Brewing before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the fairly near future. But if you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. Remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system, put in your hometown or whatever, and if you search for the area and I've reviewed beers from there, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Japanese playlist along with many other things that will be getting added to quite intensively over the next little while, and then beyond that whenever I get the chance. But yeah, there are playlists there from many different countries, so I do recommend that you check out those too. But there are some very interesting things in that Japanese playlist, I have to say. So yeah, let's crack on and we'll go on to my brewery notes and I'll tell you a wee bit about West Coast Brewing. So, West Coast Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Mochimune City in Shizuoka Prefecture in Japan, right next to Mount Fuji. But the brewery was founded back in 2019 by Derek Baston, who is originally from Seattle in Washington over in the US, and he previously worked as an architect. So Derek originally came to Shizuoka back in 2003, and he would often visit different breweries during his trips home, but he said that he'd always been inspired by the craftsmanship that went into the West Coast US beers, and he wanted to bring that to Japan because he felt there wasn't really anyone, or there just wasn't many people doing this at the time. But apparently the idea to found his own brewery can be traced back to 2014 when he designed the Shizuoka distillery for Gaia Flow. And this was his first real look inside the brewing and distilling world, and it inspired him to visit other breweries and distilleries and talk to those inside the industry. And apparently doing this made the whole process of starting his own brewery a lot less daunting, and he decided that he wanted to go for it. So he founded a bar in Shizuoka called 12 to test the water and see if the types of beer that he wanted to brew would actually be a hit. And quite quickly it became clear that they would, and this really pushed them further into actually brewing for themselves. So they found a premises in an abandoned tuna processing factory in the Mochimune marina, and they renovated it and converted it into a brewery. So the brewery itself is equipped with a 10 BBL system, which is around 1600 litres per brew. They've got 10 fermentation vessels so far and 2 bright beer tanks as well, and they produce between 12 to 20,000 litres of beer per month. And the 3 brewers are Satoshi Niwa from Japan, who's the brewing manager, then there's Cedric Mel from France, and then Grant Scholler, who is from the US. But the brewery's mascot is the Hop Dude, which appears on pretty much all of the can art, and you can see the Hop Dude kind of chilling here on the beach, and it's designed by Simon Henshaw, who, if I remember correctly, is from Manchester in England, but I could be wrong on that. But over the first few years, they've been brewing mainly different kinds of IPAs, but they're also in the process of establishing a barrel program at the moment, and I have seen a few other styles coming out from them recently as well. A Pilsner and a brown ale actually were on the list at Asahiya quite recently. But as of April 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 240 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and like I mentioned to you earlier, they are mainly known for their different kinds of IPAs, but probably it's fair to say mainly the New England Hazy IPAs. But yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about West Coast Brewing for the moment. There will no doubt be more to add to that in the future at some stage. But if you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Untappd page to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and have a look at the beer itself. So just to let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. So there you can see the West Coast Brewing symbol there with the hop dude. I'm not sure how well that's going to zoom in there, but it's a little bit shiny, which is probably a bit of a problem. But there you can see the hop dude building sandcastles there with his pals on the beach, a little crab and stuff as well. But yeah, really nice looking beer can, this one, I have to say. Like I mentioned in the first West Coast Brewing review that I did, the main thing that stuck out to me about these cans was the fact that they're half litres, which is quite unusual in Japan for craft beer. The bigger breweries all have had 500 milliliter cans for quite some time, but for a craft beer in Japan to be in a 500 milliliter can was quite unusual. There are a few breweries doing it now. But yes, this beer cost me, I believe, 1,400 yen, which is, that's probably about 10, 11 euros, something like that. So craft beer in Japan is a little bit more expensive, mainly because all of the ingredients have to be imported. The malt tends to come from Europe or the US, the hops come from the US, Australia or New Zealand for the most part. So yeah, beer is a lot more expensive in Japan than it is in other countries. But like I said to you before, this beer is Freestyle Sandbox Volume 3, a New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. This one is hopped with hops from Freestyle in New Zealand, quite a well-known hop company. It contains Racal, Waimea, and Nelson Sauvin, or Kohia Nelson. So yeah, Racal is quite an interesting one. That's about 7% alpha acid. It gives you quite a wee bit of like, I would say it's quite a kind of mango-y and apricot-y hop with a bit of pineapple in my experience. Quite a lot of tropical fruit. Waimea is an interesting one, about 16% alpha acid, quite a bit of grapefruit and orange from what I remember. And then, Nelson is always that kind of white, green, grapey sort of thing that you get from that, about 16% alpha acid as well, the classic New Zealand hop. This one I believe from Freestyle Kohia Nelson, sorry, my apologies. So yeah, interesting stuff, I have to say. That should be quite interesting. But yeah, as I say, 8.5% New England IPA, the third iteration of this beer. Let's get it out into the glass and see what we have. The Freestyle Sandbox Volume 3. Really looking forward to this one. So, here we are. As you can see, I've got my lovely Mino glass on the channel once again. It's been quite a wee while, I think, since this glass is featured on the channel. I think we've got maybe about 2/3 of the beer out of the can into the glass, but that should be more than enough for the moment to have a look at the beer. So, as you can see then, this beer is poured pretty much as you would expect from a modern hazy New England IPA. So you can see that this beer has poured with about a little bit over 3/4 of a finger of a frothy, I would say slightly cream coloured head. You can see the foam in this one is kind of medium sized bubbles. It's not the kind of foamiest of heads that you're going to come across, and like I say, a slightly cream colour, but quite a bright yellow in this one. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do, or any adjuncts that you put into the beer as well, will affect the colour, but with New England IPAs, you don't often have to care about that. So yeah, this one's got a lovely kind of bright yellow colour, kind of like a mango juice, to be honest with you. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there, which has incidentally just dropped back a little bit. But yeah, the level of haze in this one, it's not the soupiest and gloopiest of New England doubles that I've come across, but the haze in these beers depends on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you're using as well. It can vary from brewery to brewery and beer to beer. It, yeah, like I say, can vary all over the place with these beers. But this one looks very nice, pretty much as you would expect from any kind of New England IPA, be it single, double, triple, or whatever. So yeah, nothing else we really need to say about the appearance of this beer, but we can check out the aroma and see what it's all about. So let's do this. Oh yeah, I have to say, this is very, very nice. First impression of this one is that it's quite a smooth, and it's got quite a good balance between the barley malt, I would say, the oat malt and the wheat malt. As I've said in many reviews before, for me, there are 6 different things you should think about when it comes to New England IPAs. So you've got your kind of farmhousey and yeasty character, you've got the sort of rye, kind of bready type character, the wheaty bitiness, the barley malt bread, the creamy oats, and then you've also got the kind of, what's the one I'm missing, the sort of sweet side of things as well. So these are the 6 elements of flavour you should look at in a New England IPA. This one for me strikes me as being a little bit more kind of old school. It has got a bit of farmhousey yeast, it's got a bit of the wheat bitiness in there as well, some nice smooth oats, and also a good little bit of barley malt bread. And then you've got the juicy tropical fruits on top of that, and a nice kind of green component in there as well. So yeah, let's just try and break that aroma down for you and describe it a wee bit more in depth, as we always do. So, the backbone of this beer is definitely like a fresh, white bready bread crust. That's what I get straight away out of this one. You can smell that in there. There are 1 or 2 slightly woody elements coming out of it too. Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of a kind of woody character to this one, but then on top of that you've got some lovely fresh fluffy white bread in there. On top of that you can smell the wheat sort of densifying the beer out. At the back of the nose you definitely get a little bit of that kind of more wheaty, bitey character from the beer, but also you've got the nice kind of creamy oats in this one. Now, as I've said in many reviews before, oats are usually an indicator of how fresh your New England IPA is. So the drier the oats smell and taste, the older the beer is, the more creamy and smooth they are, the younger the beer is. And for me, this beer, it's still pretty fresh, but you can smell the oats are starting to just get that little bit of dryness to them. So certainly quite a bit of creamy oaty character to this one, but you can smell that they're drying up a wee bit. On top of the oats, you have got a degree of sweetness in there, which you would expect from a New England double, which is north of 8%. You do need a little bit of sweetness in there just to balance the beer out a wee bit, at least in my opinion. So yeah, there is a little bit of a kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotch type note to this one. So I do like how that goes together. The malty base in this beer is quite well balanced, but for me it's quite, the wheat is the thing that really starts to push its way forward in the aroma the more that you smell of this one. So yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, the green component, I think we said everything we need to about the malty base. So on the green side of this beer, it's interesting because there's a good little bit of, I would say, there's a good little bit of earthiness in there, but not too much. The green component really leans toward a more dank, floral type thing. And when you've got Waimea and Nelson in there, you know, those are two 16% alpha acid hops. So it's not surprising that you've got a bit more pungent floral character in there. At the front of the nose you've got a lighter kind of grassiness in there, but when it comes to the green component you do need to think about what type of hopping is being used in the beer. So there are three kinds when it comes to IPAs. You've got the early edition hopping within the first hour of the wort boil, that gives you mainly bitterness. The late edition hopping, which is in the last half hour of the wort boil, gives you a little bit of bitterness but mainly flavour and aroma. Dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, is all aroma that you'll get from those, all flavour and aroma that you'll get from those hops. So New England IPAs tend to use the latter two, late edition and dry hopping, whereas West Coast IPAs will use all three, which is why they have that kind of bigger, deep, dank aroma, whereas the New England IPAs have the brighter aroma, I would say, in terms of green component. So yeah, you can smell with this one, I think there's been a little bit of early edition hop in this one. You can smell that deep dankness in there, but again, it could just be the sheer power of the alpha acids in the Waimea and the Nelson. Raka, of course, has about 7%, but that's, you know, relatively speaking, that's not too strong. But New Zealand hops, there are quite a few New Zealand hops which are low in their alpha acid content but still give you huge fruity characters, which is quite impressive. So yeah, that's worth bearing in mind. So yeah, for me, the green component in this beer is quite floral, really leaning toward that more floral side of things. On the fruity side of the beer though, this is quite interesting. For me it's really got an interesting balance to it. I get a lot of mango out of this one, which I think is going to be mainly from the Racal. Racal's got quite a powerful aroma, so I get a good little bit of mango in there, good bit of pineapple, but at the same time I'm getting quite a lot of that white green grapey thing from the Nelson, and quite a bit of orange. The more that I smell of this beer, the more I get a kind of big oily orange out of it. You know, I'd forgotten that Waimea had such an orangey character to it. But yeah, because for me, Waimea, I always thought it was a bit more kind of pineapple-y, and I do get quite a bit of pineapple out of this one, but I do suspect that's more from the Racal than the Waimea, to be brutally honest. But yeah, aroma-wise, it's a lovely, lovely beer, this one. Like I say, the things that jump out for me most are the wheat, the green component, and then the way the orangey character builds up in this one. But still, lovely, lovely beer in terms of its aroma profile. So take a bit of time and just enjoy that for yourself. So yeah, let's do this and see what this beer is all about. So yeah, this one is the Freestyle Sandbox Volume 3, a New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from West Coast Brewing in Mochimune, Shizuoka Prefecture here in Japan. My first of a good few Japanese reviews this time. Slanja, Skål, cheers, Kampai. Oh yeah, that's nice. You know, these guys are very, very solid, I have to say. When it comes to the New England Hazies, at the moment in Japan, Uchu and West Coast Brewing are probably the two to look out for. You know, there are some very, very good breweries here now, but when it comes to New England Hazies, these two are quite hard to beat. And both are also very well-rounded breweries from what I gather as well. I've had some really nice black IPAs and Imperial Stouts from Uchu Brewing, if I remember correctly. But yeah, really, really solid beer, this one. Yeah, big thumbs up from me. The first impression that I have from tasting this one is it's a lot more kind of juicy and wet, if you like. I was expecting something to be a bit more kind of wheaty and bitey. And it does have that. It shows you a bit more of the wheaty side of the beer the further into the aftertaste, but you've also got a good green component with this one as well. The green component does give you what you expect from the aroma, but the rest of the beer is actually a little bit more mellow than the aroma would have you believe. So yeah, interesting stuff, I have to say. Yeah. Let's try and break this beer down and just describe it for you a wee bit more in depth then. So, middle third of your palate then. The backbone of this beer, as we would expect, is that lovely fresh white bready bread crust. Toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you have a little bit of a more kind of woody, and you've got a little bit of a more kind of woody character coming out of the beer. But yeah, fresh white bready bread crust, a little bit of woodiness, fluffy white bread just sitting on top of that, and the way it goes together, I have to say, is very, very nice. Yeah, there's potentially, between the bread crust and the white bread, there's potentially just a little bit of a slightly sweet wholemeal brown bread, and then, as I say, you've got that fluffy, airy white bread barley malt just sitting in there too. Above that, you get a layer of a more dense wheat, but it's actually quite a zippy wheaty character that this beer has. Yeah, you can say the bready character in this one is really light and airy, and you've got the sweetness from a little bit of brown bread in there. Then the wheaty layer, a little bit of dry. You've got that little bit of a kind of dry wheatiness to the beer as well, but a little bit of zip. And then above that, you get the nice creamy character from the oats. And I have to admit, compared to that's one of the areas where the flavour of the beer deviates from the aroma a little bit. You get more creaminess out of this one than I would have expected. So yeah, down the middle line of your palate, you've got a lovely kind of just smooth, creamy character coming out of this beer. And as you move out toward the edges, you get a little touch of dryness from the oats, but they're actually, this one must be really quite fresh actually. So yeah, lovely big kind of creamy oaty character to this one down the middle line of your palate, and it just dries out a wee bit the further out toward the edge of the palate you go. In the dead centre of your palate, you have a little bit more of a concentrated, you've got a little bit of a more kind of concentrated Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing. But above that, as you move further out toward the edges of your palate, you get a little bit of a McVitie's Digestive biscuity type quality. So definitely a good little bit of sweetness to this one. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't think there's, you know, a little bit. I don't think there's caramel or anything like that in this beer. I think that the colour just isn't right for there to be some kind of German caramel or something like that. Could be a little bit of American Turo or something, or one of the many varieties of Turo, I should say, because there's something about this beer that's just a wee bit different from the European New England IPAs that I've had recently. But yeah, whatever they're doing with this one, I have to say it is very, very solid. So yeah, big thumbs up to them for the malt base in this. They've got it just right. Bread crust, little touch of woody character, little bit of sweet kind of wholemeal brown bread, a fluffy airy layer of fresh white bread, a little bit of a more dense but slightly zippy wheaty note, and then the oaty character and the sweetness just above that. So middle third of the palate is really nice in this one, I have to say. So yeah, on the back third of the palate, you have, you know, similar flavours coming out of this one, but they're just slightly different in terms of their kind of density. So in that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of that kind of airy, bready build up there. But the base of the back third of your palate, you can feel the bread crust is a little bit drier. I've always said that sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate, the more dry and bitter flavours come out further back. So you've got a little bit of that dry, kind of bread crusty type quality coming out of this one, which is really nice. You can feel that just slightly drier and slightly more bitter. Above that, you've got more of a kind of, again, you get a little bit of the brown bready character. That layer is a little bit taller and a wee bit more airy there now, and just a little bit drier. Then above that, the fluffy white bread, you can feel the wheat layer on top of that as well, and the wheat on the back third of the palate has a wee bit more bite to it. And then above everything else, you've got the kind of yeasty side of the beer rearing its head as well. So the yeasty side for me is like quite a farmhousey, woody white bread that comes out. And yeah, the further into the aftertaste you go, you get more and more of that. So yeah, definitely on the back third of the palate you can feel the flavour is taller. And as you come further forward into the middle third of the palate, it just condenses down and squashes together. The malty and yeasty side of this beer is nice. You get a little bit more yeastiness out of this beer the further into the aftertaste you go, and that kind of adds to the complexity that you get from it adds to the complexity that you get out of this beer, I have to say. But it's a lovely, the malty and yeasty side of this one I think is really nicely done. It definitely leans more toward the wheaty side of things, but yeah, I get more and more yeasty character out of this beer the more that I drink of it. So yeah, not going to complain about that at all. Yeah, I think we've said everything we need about the malty and yeasty side of the beer, so we can move on to the hoppy side of things with this one then. So let's look at the green component first. So, back corners of the palate for me, definitely a little bit of earthiness there, and as you move further forward along the sides of the palate, you get a little touch of the deeper and danker elements of the green side of things. And like I say, that could be one of two things. It could be just the fact that the Waimea and the Nelson are quite potent in their alpha acid content, or there could also be a little bit of early edition hopping going on in this one, because yeah, I do get a little bit of that deep dank character, but as you move further forward on the sides of your palate, you get a brighter kind of floral aromaticity out of the beer, and round the front curve of the tongue there's a lighter and more grassy side of things in there as well, which I do quite like. So yeah, the way that goes together I think is really, really nice. The green component for me, the floral character of it fits quite well with the slight wheaty leaning that the beer has. So that's definitely good. Yeah, on the front third of your palate then, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a white bready build up in there, and that kind of lingers. You do get a bit of the oatiness creeping forward as well, and a bit of sweetness from the oats as well, but the base of that front third of your palate, you get the bread crust, the white bread, and a little touch of the brown bread. Then you've got that nice oily bubble on top of that where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And yeah, I think basically the back half of that front third of your palate is more to do with the Racal, and then the Nelson and the Waimea are coming out a little bit further forward. So yeah, on the back half of that front third of your palate, yeah, it's mainly like a juicy mango that I think you're getting there. So yeah, quite a little bit of juicy mango for me. As you reach the middle of your palate, you get a bit of apricot underneath, but then a bit of juicy pineapple on top. As you move into the front half of the front third of your palate though, you get the Nelson in the base, you get that white, green, grapey, almost gooseberry-like flavour, and above that there's a bit more kind of oily, orangey character from the Waimea. So that's really interesting for me. Yeah, I think it's been years since I had something with Waimea in it, which is a shame because I know it's a very, very good hop, but it's just, I think, you know, hops seem to go in peaks and troughs. Simcoe disappeared for a long time in favour of Galaxy, now everything's about Idaho 7, you know, it just happens. Some hops disappear for a long time before making a reappearance. It's just how things go. I think it's to do with the yields and so on, and, you know, just demands from different geographical places in the world. But yeah, you know, you get used to this, that some hops disappear for a little while. But yeah, the thing that's really catching me about this beer is how orangey the Waimea is, and the further into the aftertaste you go, I get more and more orange out of this beer. So the mango, the apricot, and the pineapple from the Racal is sitting there as well, but you've got the nice oily white, green, grapey and gooseberry notes from the Nelson. But yeah, you have definitely that oily, orangey character from the Waimea sitting in this beer too. So yeah, the fruity side of this one, the more that I drink of this, it gets a little bit more oily, but it's still quite a juicy, hazy New England IPA, this I have to say. But a lovely, lovely beer, and I can't knock it at all. It's in very good condition, it drinks very well, gives you everything you'd want. You really cannot knock this beer in the slightest. So yeah, another very, very solid offering from West Coast Brewing, I have to say. Let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. So, mouthfeel wise, for me, this beer, it's pushing the top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It does have a little bit of wetness and kind of cleanliness to the mouthfeel, but it doesn't strike me as being overly thick or overly creamy, I have to say. It has just got that nice drinkability to it. So yeah, I'd say top end of mid-bodied, smooth carbonation, not overly wet, but a little bit smoother, things like that. In terms of the bitterness, I would say that this beer is perhaps, it feels a little bit more bitter than the usual 30 IBUs that a New England IPA would have, but you know, 50 or 60 IBUs wouldn't feel out of place for this one, but that's my guess. Always take my IBU count with a little bit of a pinch of salt. It's my weakest point of beer reviewing. So yeah, I think about 50 or 60 IBUs with this one. The malt base, like I said, has a bit of dryness to it, but a bit of smoothness and creaminess and a wee bit of bitiness from the wheat. And then with the fruity side of things, it starts off very juicy, this one, but I feel this beer gets more and more oily the further into the aftertaste that you go. But like I've repeated a few times, West Coast Brewing have done a very, very good job with this one, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink this beer again. But you know, West Coast are always putting out different things, and it's nice to try the different beers that they do. So yeah, another positive experience with West Coast Brewing, and you cannot ask for much more than that. So I definitely need to go to Mochimune at some point and film an out and about video at their tap room. We'll see about making that happen in the next year or so. We'll see about that. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So this beer was the Freestyle Sandbox Volume 3, a hazy New England double IPA at 8.5% ABV from West Coast Brewing in Mochimune, Shizuoka Prefecture here in Japan. A very nice way to kick off this little mini-series of Japanese reviews that you're going to see over the next little while. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from West Coast Brewing, and we will absolutely return to these guys at some point in the very near future. Check out Liquor Shop Asahiya here in Osaka too, and yeah, we will have, no doubt have more of their beers at some point in the very near future. Slàinte, Skull, cheers, Kampai, check out West Coast Brewing. These guys are pretty damn awesome, I have to say.